Referrals, kickbacks, and ethics, contradictory terms at times. And with us today to lead our panel discussion is Jason Dunbar of Luke Brown Yachts. He's originally began his career with Florida Yacht Charter and Sales. He's licensed captain, yacht broker. He's delivered yachts all over the place, and of course that's not a bad thing to have in your resume when you're selling yachts. In the fall of 1996, Jason started with Andrew Silla, one of our pioneers in the industry at Luke Brown Yachts. Became Andrew's partner, vice president of Luke Brown Yachts in 2011. And then he continued on partnering with Mark Geddes of Patton Marine, providing yacht appraisals, expert testimony, insurance, importation values, company vessel surveys, and so on and so forth. And Jason is also a passionate advocate, and he played a great role on the board of directors as a legislative advocate, and he did a real good job for us in all the progress that we made up at the state of Florida. Mike Carlson of 26 North Yachts, after completing several transatlantic crossings and sailing extensively throughout the Northeast, Mediterranean, Caribbean, Mike made the transition from being at sea to racing to moving ashore and starting a sales career in the yachting industry. In 2011, he started 26 North Yachts. So Mike loves to compete and challenge himself. That drive has enabled 26 North Yachts to become a top-level and prominent sales organization. We have Peter Cantell of Denison Yachting. And Peter grew up boating in the South Shore of Long Island. This common refrain that we hear about everybody involved in boating or yachting or sailing or fishing or whatever it might in one way. Experienced family boating, surfing, fishing, and clamming. That's going from a very young age in the Great South Bay. 2010, he left to assist in launching Nautique Yachting, Neptunus, Zealander, and Van Dutch Yachts as a product. 2012, Peter joined the forces with Denison the Denison Yachting family. And then we have another one of those pioneers. There he is, Whit Kirtland. Great, three-time, I think, FIBA president, but FIBA now FIBA. Whit has a 36-year career in yacht brokerage, third generation of his family. We all know him in association with, of course, with Merrill Stevens in Miami. Whit has served on the board of directors, president 3 times, as I mentioned, for the International Yacht Broker Association, as a board member with the International Super Yacht Society, and a Certification Advisory Council board member for the Certified Professional Yacht Brokers. And then another good friend of ours, Jeff Cox of Cox Company. Jeff founded the law firm known as Cox Company, Maritime and Aviation Law. For over a decade, had been in business, focusing solely on maritime and aviation law. A large portion of the practice involves yacht and airplane purchases and sales, new yacht registration, refits, and on and on and on. Foreign flagging, ship mortgages, yacht chartering, and crew. We have a really good all-star panel here to discuss this very, very interesting and controversial topic. I'll let you take it, Jason, as our moderator.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bob. I want to thank you guys for joining this. I have a great amount of respect for your work ethic and your longevity and being able to stay in an incredibly difficult and highly competitive industry. And thank you for joining me. And ethics in yacht brokerage is complicated. Something as simple as the law, which you would feel is black and white. I walk out of here, I get arrested today. I get my day in court, I get to give my side of the story to a judge, I get acquitted. Obviously, I didn't do anything wrong. There's subjectivity, even in something that you would feel is as black and white as the law. And that's why we have judges to make that decision. When you get into the subjectivity of ethics, it's a gray area. I mean, it's 50 shades of gray area. It's like really staggeringly difficult sometimes to ascertain who is really at fault. And we have a wonderful arbitration committee at IYBA that can help get through the dust and find out, who is to blame. And in so many situations out there, as you look in this room, the probability of you hearing a story from one yacht broker saying about another yacht broker of something they did unethical, and then you hear that other person's side of the story, and then you have to wonder, is the truth somewhere in the middle? It's that classic example of there's his side, there's her side, and the truth is somewhere in the middle. Is that the world we're living in? And there are things we're going to touch on here that were considered unethical that might not be considered unethical. But before I think we go down this road, we should define the difference between, and maybe Jeff, you can help us with this, the difference between when you've done something truly illegal or when you've done something that may be outside of the boundary of ethics, and where are those guidelines written?
Well, the first thing is, what are we talking about here? What does ethics mean? And the word ethics is derived from a Greek word, ethos, which basically means character. And it's also derived from the Latin word mores, which has to do with customs. So it's basically character and customs that are established. Combined character and customs define how individuals will choose to interact with each other, basically. And you know, there's many examples of behavior that may be unethical, but not necessarily illegal. For example, it is unethical to gossip about or betray a friend, but it wouldn't be illegal to gossip about or betray a friend. But it would be unethical, and I think everybody would agree with that. The law, on the other hand, to quote Justice Earl Warren from 1962, he said, "In civilized life, the law floats in a sea of ethics." And it's helpful to kind of think of the law as sort of a floor of acceptable behavior, but ethics brings the level of what would be acceptable up much higher to a level that we're very comfortable living in. So for example, you could find many opportunities to do perfectly contemptible, despicable things that would not technically be illegal. Now in our context, obviously, we'll get into some areas where some of those things may actually be illegal and could actually end up ending your career as a yacht broker or whatever profession you're in if you were to do them, because we have you know, a different set of, we have a statute that we operate under, as everybody knows, Chapter 326, and we have the
Yacht and Shipbrokers Act.
Regulations that implement it. We have, it's the Yacht and Shipbrokers Act. And we also have a set of bylaws that contain a lot of ethical
Boundaries.
boundaries that we'll touch on a bit.
Yeah, that's great. And I think the previous panel, it was fascinating. There's emerging technologies that can create or remove what would be considered something that was unethical back in the day when you started. You know, I know that, I don't know where you got the lumber for Noah's boat, but you know, you had to cut it down somewhere. But as far as things that we did yesterday that would have been considered unethical may not be today because technologies have changed. Can you think of anything in your guys' career where these changes have come from?
Well, you know, it's hard for me to believe that somebody that grew up in a shipyard on the Miami River in the 70s and 80s is on an ethics panel.
Wow. My times have changed. You've aged well.
You know, I would tell you that I got off of boats and started selling boats in 1983. And back then it was a different world. There was no buck, no yacht world. It was your reputation with everybody else in the industry. And if you wanted to advertise a boat, you had to ask permission from one of the guys at Fraser or Ardell that had all the big boats back in those days. And you would have to make sure that they trusted you not to do anything that they didn't like. And
price it lower than they were advertising it.
Exactly. Or in the same magazine they were. They wanted, you know, anything in yachting was theirs. And so it is, back then a handshake meant something. It really did. And I tried to follow that, and I still try to follow that, and I do follow that. But it is one of those things, ethics and what's legal are two completely different things. I think for ethics, you have to think of what you can sleep with at the end of the day, that you're a good person and you handled yourself properly. Legally, there's a lot of things you can do and get away with and get paid. But back in the 80s, it truly was a very small knit group of people. You had to treat everybody right, and if you treated somebody wrong, you got blackballed.
You wouldn't be allowed to advertise your boat, their boat, in Yachting magazine when they were doing Powered Mower Yacht, for example.
That's correct.
They would say, no, we're done with you.
Absolutely.
But today, with the technology, the way that our websites scrape the listings off of everybody else's website, do you really even have to ask anymore? You just, your search engine is going to put up my neighbor's, your listing, just like, that is gone. That is a change in the ethical course of our industry since we've been doing this. Can you guys think of anything that's changed since?
Well, that's a paid service. You're paying the MLS systems to feed and show up on your MLS system. So it's not necessary. This has been a constant argument between a lot of the companies, a lot of the big players down here, and that is my listing showing up on this website or that website, and then buyers are calling going, well, who actually has the listing?
It is a problem.
And they're so confused because if you Google it, whoever's paying more money to show up on Google, they're gonna be in the top 3. So
Did they do anything unethical?
not if they're paying the service.
Exactly.
And
And
and again, I haven't been doing it even close to it. You know, Whit's
Whit
been
been
around,
doing
so, I mean, I think
That
between the three of
advertising
us-
of boats that you may not have permission to do also causes problems for the owner of the boat if they're coming back into the United States and attempting to get a cruising permit, and all of a sudden they find out that the boat is being advertised for charter when it's not listed with a broker, it's not anywhere. I mean, somebody just kind of grabbed and cut and paste or copied.
Can't get a cruising permit.
Yeah, you can't get a cruising permit. Because
I think
Customs is
too,
taking,
Jason,
you know,
like-
the position that boats that are advertised for charter are not here to cruise. They're here for commercial purposes, and they won't get, it's a big nightmare. And we've ended up having situations where we have to like try to figure out who it is that's got this thing online.
and it's not
That's-
something malicious they're doing, it's the program
Well,
they've
they're
set up.
trying to, you know, generate leads somehow, which is fine.
Right. Mike?
And then you have a customs agent who's sitting there with a computer and Googles the boat name, and the captain's like, huh? We haven't chartered in 4 years, you know?
It's a problem.
Yeah.
It's a modern problem.
Right. I'm like, well, here
Yeah,
it is
I
online.
think it's getting, it's getting better now. Well, I don't know about better, but more people are understanding it. I think when online marketing, I think the yachting industry certainly lags behind in that sense compared to real estate and so forth. But there was certainly a big lack of understanding how it all works, whether like algorithms or content or so forth or rankings. And I think someone that's very good at doing that and bumps up their rankings and has been educated on how to do that and studies it and spends a lot of time, and then you have backlash from various
Those that
people.
weren't good at it, maybe.
Yeah, right,
Or don't
exactly, which is
understand
true, or don't understand it, which was more so, just from my own experience, was a lack of understanding. So it wasn't necessarily about it being ethical or not, even though maybe they personally felt like it was unethical, but more so just a lack of understanding.
I get it. And in the early years of my career, we had this thing called procuring cause. I don't know if you guys remember that, but if you printed your listing off of Buck, mailed it to a guy, he opened the mail, called you on it, you show him the boat, even if he goes, this guy just reminds me of somebody that used to date my wife, I don't want to be around him, and you lose that customer, and he's now on the boat or buying with another boat, I'm getting a lawyer because I was procuring cause. And that happened. It's inconceivable now.
Yeah,
it's a
now you're
shotgun
right.
spray of emails that go out.
You would have to have continuous contact to negotiate the deal in order to have a chance to get your commission anymore. I mean,
But that is just an ethical boundary that existed, and it was solid.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's completely disappeared now. It's just gone. It's a part of our evolving industry and adapting to new technologies. And we'll put a pin in that for now and go on to maybe the touch on what the subject of this was, and kickbacks and referral fees. And this is one that I find very interesting because, as working with Andrew Silla for 26 years, you got fired if you were found taking a kickback, and he was very adamant about that you made every dollar that a broker at Luke Brown made was seen on a closing statement. But the colleagues of mine, my good friends in this industry, people, my barbecues and my wedding, my friends did it. And I never thought anything that they were doing something unethical. But was I looking at it from the customer's perspective? Did this cost the customer anything? In my early days, I kind of thought it was a clever marketing tool for Andrew, but then things evolve, and you make friends with the insurance guys who say, we can't do this, there's laws, because that must have become a problem at some point that they needed to make a law to stop that. The banking industry, when we were involved in the tax cap, kept whispering in our ear, hey, make it so we don't have to pay kickbacks, put that in the laws. We didn't have the time to even address that because we were so consumed with trying to get the cap passed. But when you look at something like let's take the bankers, for example, that may be in this room, if you're making 1.5 points on the sale of the money, and the broker says, I'll only give you that business if I get a half a point, which is 33% of your income. Is that ethical? It might be, it might not be. I think it's subjective in this highly subjective subject. But then what does the customer feel about it that's buying the money? Is that getting passed on to him? And then if that is the case, does that cross the boundaries of ethics then?
Well, the key there is, what does the customer think about it? And the customer has to know, because if the customer doesn't know, then it's not only unethical, it's also illegal.
Wait. So if the banker pays a referral fee to his broker and the customer that's buying the money doesn't know he's getting the referral fee.
If you could consider that to be misrepresentation of the customer, perhaps. I mean, first of all, you have the Florida Administrative Code that says all money has to go through the trust account on a transaction. So that money won't be in a trust account. You have the Chapter 326 that says that the division may suspend or revoke the license if you have a substantial or intentional misrepresentation in a transaction. If you commit fraud or dishonest acts in a transaction, you could have your license revoked as well, plus a civil penalty perhaps. And our code of our bylaws, now admittedly I'm pulling up an old copy, but I'm assuming that we haven't changed our ethical positions much, but we have bylaws that would be completely 100% counter to that. You know, it's the duty of the member to protect the public. You know, you have a fiduciary responsibility to your client. So if you could have taken that opportunity to make your client's loan deal a little bit better by half a point instead of taking the money, or if you didn't talk to your client about it and you took the money, you have a big problem if the client decides.
If you're a CPYB, you're not allowed to take that money.
Yeah, you're not allowed to take it under IYBA.
I've never gotten money from anybody borrowing money. I've always told the people I want them to service my client the best.
Yeah.
And
I mean, you could make an argument that brokers act as the sales force for a large part of the yacht industry. But you need to have that transparent conversation with your client and say, hey, look, I'm going to make a commission when I sell you a boat, but I also might make some money if I sell you tower electronics, you know, money, you know, whatever. There's throughout the history of our business, there's been plenty of vendors that don't have salespeaple. They rely on brokers.
This is interesting because as we sit up here on this stage, very high and mighty, talking about ethics, what we are talking about the brokers receiving this reward for bringing the business, is not only something that I would consider common to a point where it's almost not even frowned upon in cocktail conversations, but then it's a two-way road. We pay out to the captains, and there is a massive amount of, I guess kickback is the word I'll stick with on this, that, you know, when they're shopping which broker they are going to work with. I'll just quickly divert, I don't know how much time we have, but in my attempt to get a listing, the captain lands on the airplane, I've got the interview with him, I'm gonna meet him at Waxy's, I'm gonna buy him anything he wants on that meal, on that wine, whatever. He shows up in the BMW that my competition bought him. I was kind of out of it, you know? Yep. The other brokerage firm bought the guy a car. I was gonna buy him anything on the menu at Waxy's. Anyway, it is what it is. Did they do something unethical?
I think to that too, Jason, it's becoming such common practice now, I feel, at least from my experience, on kickbacks with captains and so forth, as owners, it's not like there's not the ethical dilemma of informing the owner or not. Oftentimes, from what the owner's well informed of that and almost has expectations, is part of the broker's commission will be almost severance for the captain, is a way for them not to go out of pocket. So I think there's different layers of that as well, certainly.
So what you just said there, part of our commission becomes the severance of the captain as the boat gets paid out. And as long as the owner knows that, you're not in that 50 shades of gray area of is it ethical or not. That's lily white and ethical.
You put that right on the closing statement.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
The issue is that you'd also need to probably, to do it right, you'd probably have to have that on a seller's closing statement.
Yeah, that's what was just
If you
saying.
do that, fine. I mean, that's, you know, freedom of contract. That would be, then you now got a contractual relationship, and he's in for a piece.
And it's
The
transparent.
question is whether he's Whether this captain is now acting as a broker without a license, that's another matter, but I mean, you could probably work around that.
It depends where you're doing business to, because in London, there's the anti-bribery laws. You're not allowed to do that.
Okay, that's where they've set the bottom. We haven't got there. Peter, you got something?
I had an unusual situation very recently where I have both sides of the deal on a boat that's closing. And the owner point blank said to me, since there's no other broker involved, you need to take care of my captain. Like, put it in writing. And I was like, wow. First time that's ever happened.
Well, and again, now you're not dealing with broker ethics, you're dealing with the ethics of the owner, I guess, would be where you're diverting into that category.
You're potentially renegotiating your listing agreement as well, verbally.
Yeah. Okay, so we may have beat that down, and you can kind of see how that kind of mutates and evolves a little bit, and there are, 1,000 different versions on where that money should come, but transparency, I think, is the key there. And again, the overwhelming, the umbrella over this is the customer. What is it in the benefit of the customer, the yacht owner, the buyer, the seller? As long as we are protecting their interests and they are aware of what we're doing, it seems like you're staying within the boundaries of something ethical. And I also think it's worth pointing out in on a topic like this, that as Representative Lamarca was saying earlier, we are in a lightly regulated industry. And the more we begin to complain and don't regulate ourselves, the state's going to do it. And is that something we want? In many cases, like we were talking about in our pickup conversation, when in the 80s there was no regulation and the state came in and said, hey, there's a lot of escrow accounts where guys are disappearing and we can't find them, it started killing our business. Then you get the origin of the FYBA to organize, get the state involved, have the state monitor the escrow accounts, and because of that regulation, a very simple regulation like that, we, the brokerages in Florida, are the juggernaut of this industry. There isn't even a close second when you look on the sales on Yacht World, where sales are created in this world.
Volume.
Florida is the 800-pound gorilla in the room. We run the show. I think Hong Kong's the closest second, and that's all commercial stuff, but we do it. Did that regulation have anything to do with that? I think there's a real strong argument to say yes, because we are a safe place to park the money.
Correct.
And that came through regulation. Do we want more? If we got more, would it create more business? It's a topic that merits a lot of thought before you approach the state, and I applaud the IYBA for always, the board of directors, that's something they constantly do. But it is dicey because...
Well, a perfect example to illustrate the difference is in Florida, we have the Yacht and Shipbrokers Act, which actually creates a fiduciary responsibility for the broker to their client. In an analogous industry, the aviation industry, we don't have that. And what's common in the aviation industry is the broker will literally buy the plane and then turn around and sell it on another contract. They call it back-to-back contracts.
So what you're saying is
doesn't know that he just made
the broker, the aviation
$2 million
broker gets the
commission.
call and the guy says, I want to buy this plane for $8 million. The broker then says, I don't know if that exists. He then picks up the phone and says, hey, Bob, can I buy your plane for $8 million? Marks it up another $1 million and calls the guy and says, I got a 9. And that's completely lily white and legal.
It's a back-to-back contract. It's two transactions.
That's the way it's normally done.
It's commonly done. And it doesn't work for the benefit of the guy that's trying to buy an airplane because he just paid $2 million more than he needed to, probably.
How is that different than flipping a home? I understand like the contractual part.
The difference is that you've called a broker to find you a plane.
Right.
And he goes out and buys it for himself and then tells you what he discovered and then sells it to you without, he didn't give you the opportunity to
Literally
buy
at
it
the
as a
same
broker.
table.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah, that's got the feeling of yuck to it. You
it's
know
got-
what I mean?
right.
It's like,
Well, it's no different than some of the wholesalers that we all deal with.
okay, so just
Right.
to keep this moving, and there are some topics, we're going to bring up a couple of things, and I'll open up to the floor until I don't want to open it up to the floor in case this gets too hot. But just a couple other things to get your guys' opinions on. Do you guys have any opinion on when are you ethically free from being bound to disclose a damage history? Where is that line that says it's been way too long ago, too many owners ago, it is irrelevant, too many sales ago? What is there a line, or does that line ebb and flow?
Yes, I think you got to always tell any history. If the boat's had damage, hit a reef, sunk, taken on water, a fire, I think you always, no matter how old it is, it's been fixed, but I think you need to disclose it.
Okay, but you've already put some terms on the size of the damage, just within your own statement. So even that's subjective. It's got to be a particular amount of damage. Peter, what do you got?
The challenge is that we all have the sign-off, the material damage forms that the owners have to sign.
Material is subjective.
And I've had a few owners refuse to actually sign it, and I said, fine, go list your boat with somebody else. My license isn't worth it.
I'm glad you're up here.
But the fact is that you have to do your due diligence on what you're going to be representing and what your name is attached to. I had represented a boat several years ago, and I had, before I listed it, I did Googled it and went back, and I found an article that the boat had sank.
It's a biggie.
But no, I'm going back. Like, it was an article that showed up in like the Sun Sentinel 15 years back, 2 owners ago. The current owner didn't know about it. So
That's complicated.
where does that fall to me? I actually disclosed it to everybody.
I have a few
did the
things
right
to
thing.
say about it.
So, which then again, I actually wound up walking away from the listing, but it wasn't disclosed to them, but it was through my research, I dug it up.
So we've all kind of probably got stories about this. In the broad sense of things, we don't have a statute on point that says that you have to disclose things on the
That's a
sale of
huge
goods.
sentence right there, by the way. You
We
just
don't.
said there's no law, there's like
no statute.
no
The
basement
Uniform
that society
Commercial
will
Code
accept.
governs the sale of goods. The sale of yachts is the sale of goods. It's not real estate. So we don't have a statute that says that you must disclose known defects. So we don't have that. You might have language in your listing agreement. That would be a matter of contract. If they failed to disclose something that they agreed to disclose, and there's reasons why you might not want to have that in your listing agreement, but that's another story. But that would be a breach of contract. Now, the other thing that can happen, and what famously happened a few years ago, was negligent misrepresentation. That's a different story. You can't say that something is something that it's not, because you could be sued outside of contract in tort law. If you said, and this is the rough facts of a case that happened years ago, I'm not going to mention names, but basically a broker held a piece of a hull side up and said the hull is this kind of material and this is that boat and it's wonderful and everything else, and then the sale closed, the boat broke, and they discovered that it was not anything close to that hull. That was the wrong boat or whatever.
We held our breath during that. I remember it well.
I remember the boat.
There was no substantial basis for the broker to be making that representation that that was the hull. So that became a negligent misrepresentation, which is a tort, and the damages were, they were applied. So we don't have necessarily a duty to disclose things that's founded in general law, but you may have a duty, you do have a duty not to negligent misrepresent something.
That's a great point.
And you also have whatever obligations you've agreed to in your listing agreement if you're the seller of a boat. The problem with putting those, that type of language in listing agreements is it opens the door for any future claim to come in and sue on a contract theory, and all they have to do is get you into the discovery basis of litigation, and you're already so deep into litigation that you'll be prompted to settle in some manner. So that language opens the door.
Well, that would then encourage you to be ethical and disclose that, knowing
it
that
doesn't
lies.
matter. You could be 100% above board, disclose everything you ever thought of, but the minute something breaks on that boat post-closing, they could theoretically come in with a lawsuit and say that you failed to disclose this. And
Choose
you'd be
your words
"No, I
carefully."
didn't." They'd say, yes, you did. And then now you're in litigation.
Okay.
And they're in. That's enough to survive a motion to dismiss. They're in litigation. You're going to have to produce discovery.
You're making me nervous just talking about litigation.
I'm just telling you, that's how it happens.
I'm not enjoying this.
So you think about how many hurricane boats from the Virgin Islands or Hurricane Sandy that are floating out there now that have changed hands 4 or 5 times because our annual turnover here, annual ownership is every 2.5 years for an owner on a boat?
Power Motor Yacht says 3 to 5.
Okay.
But it could be something much more, simple grounding. How many boats have ran aground in the Bahamas here locally? So it's like, I guess then it becomes subjective. Do you disclose every grounding in that boat's history?
The whiskey bumps coming up to the dock. Bam.
Yeah, right. So
Going up on the sandbar.
say the props pierce the hull, then I certainly would disclose that. if there was that history. But if there's something, maybe it's what you consider as very minor, and then later
It's
on they find out
subjective.
there's much bigger
100%
issues because of it.
subjective.
Okay, so let's
If you're
put
a
a pin
seller
in
and you want to be protected, though, rely on the sale of goods under the UCC, as is where is. You have the right to inspect, you inspect, and then you accept, and it's
Okay.
over.
Well, let's
That's
put a pin
the
in.
only way to be safe.
Let's change topics again to keep this moving.
We've got to get that in the lab.
Yeah. But you're making me want to change career here. So kind of going into something a bit more modern and maybe our modern ethical questions, it occurred to me that, I was watching a James Bond film and somebody sold an evil doctor a boat. If it was Pam Barlow and the guy comes in with an eye patch, speaking East German, petting a hairless cat, he might want a boat. And it's okay for her to sell him a boat that's got trap doors under it that his minions can go out and pull nuclear warheads. And Fred Kirtland built a detachable stern to it in case it got shot at,
Yeah, we did.
Did she do something unethical selling it to the one-eyed German petting a hairless cat? I don't think that was her job to find that guy that was James Bond's job to
If
find it.
Pam did it, it's fine.
Right. Now, let's say that same eye patch wearing guy comes in and he wants to sell his 80 meter rapidly. And you say, why do you want to sell your 80 meter rapidly, Vladimir? Is this a modern problem today? Do we have an ethical issue there, or is that not our job? And I don't know if I have an answer, but I sure as hell would like to hear your guys.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I would have the same question for Jeff, or if you see, someone's had a history or a pending.
But is it our
Well,
job?
First question
Right,
is,
it
when
is.
did
In
we
case
all
he's
volunteer
sanctioned.
to save the free world, right? I mean,
What's that?
when did we all volunteer to save the free world? When did that become our problem? But, the fact of the matter is that you have international consensus on anti-money laundering and things like that, and it's becoming more and more onerous every year. And it's getting to the point where you're like, wait a minute, I'm the yacht broker, I'm the attorney. How the hell am I supposed to be
Exactly.
policing
Are we
this
a
on global
promoter or are
basis?
we the police? I mean, where is
So
that
you
line defined?
basically have to drill down and say, okay, where are your obligations? Are you representing a client? In my case, I'm always representing a client. I always have a fiduciary responsibility to a client. You may, if you have a listing and you have a client who's trying to sell their boat, but if you get approached by somebody that you think maybe is on a sanction list or something like that, that's a good question. Now you're really getting into the ethical weeds. What do you do?
The sanction list is an easy one.
The sanction list is easy. It's just a void, right?
Yeah, but he's going to be behind 19 layers of corporations. You're never going to know.
There's going to be layers and layers.
I mean, I frankly
LLCs
haven't
to
seen
hide
it
the
much in
or-
the United States. I think that it's
Well, it's a
more
new
of
problem.
European problem.
It's a brand new problem in our brand new world. And I do love this business because you do get crap like this that you're like,
Right.
wow, this is bizarre.
I mean, we certainly get asked about nationalities of people when we're trying to get parts from Northern European yards. Now, send an affidavit proving you're not Russian, for example.
Wow.
So,
I did not
that's-
know that.
That's becoming a thing.
It's a thing.
yeah.
Okay. How we doing on
But,
time?
for the most part, I think we're insulated because we're the last people they'd want to deal with. We're highly regulated in the yacht brokerage world in Florida. I mean, so if you're an international bad guy, you go find a broker in Europe. They're not coming here. So
Wow.
You're off the panel.
Yeah. Jeff, I'd have someone taste your food in Monaco. Get a food taster. Okay, Paul, do you want to open it up a little bit to the cast of characters in this room?
We're highly regulated. Is this thing working? We're highly regulated, Jeff. We have 6 whole paragraphs. It's amazing.
it's in the yacht brokerage world. That's 6 more than anybody else got.
So this might be a little controversial, but we're talking about ethics. What's everybody's opinion of not for sale to co-brokerage? I mean, are we hindering our clients?
As long as the client knows.
Right.
That's our next panel discussion.
It is.
You're a game changer.
Paul, get me my vest before I answer any of these
Yeah,
questions.
my feeling, Jenny, is like as long as the client needs, if they're aware of that and it's not being advertised available for co-brokerage, come to find out further along in the deal that all of a sudden now the boat's not available for co-brokerage, has a substantially reduced commission or otherwise, then it becomes problematic and unethical.
Let
I
the
agree.
client
It-
know.
It is. As long as the client knows you're going to
you have moral high ground.
Yeah. All right, fine. First problem is that you might have a listing agreement that says certain things you'll do, where the broker will make the listing available and everything else. So your listing agreement has to be squared away with your client that you have the right to do that without breaching your listing agreement. Then you have the bylaws of our organization here that says that you must provide cooperating brokers with adequate protection in the case of something like this. So you have to tell them, excuse me, that there's a reduced commission before they present offers. I mean, you should tell them at the outset.
Ethically?
Ethically.
Okay.
Ethically. There's not a legal thing there. The only legal thing could be between you and your client, the owner.
Yeah.
So if you've covered that in your listing agreement and he's aware that you're not going to put it on the MLS right away or anything like that, then legally you're okay. But ethically, you have a problem because Section 14 of our bylaws says you have to provide cooperating brokers with adequate protection in case of a transaction between the owner and a cooperating broker's client. So that's square. You've got to tell them.
Yep.
Also, you have another area. You have a general obligation to protect the public against fraud. You have the fidelity to your client's interest, and just ethically, we've all seen it where broker negotiates a deal, get an accepted offer, and then the story about the commission comes out.
Yeah, you send your co-broke over for
Sorry.
signatures, and they go, whoa, whoa, whoa. This is the commission. That's not.
And they say, well, we're not 60-40, or we're not 70, we're this, or we're that, or we're something else, and you find out after you've already got everybody to sign the offer. That's completely unethical.
But so my experience with that, and throughout the years, I've had a lot of kickback with my team, or not with us specifically, but something that I enforce or certainly encourage is prior to presenting an offer, so long as you know it's a real offer and it's moving forward and there's deposits and so forth, that a commission agreement is signed in advance of having a signed
The tendered
agreement.
offer.
Completely. And I get a lot of backlash, for going about it like that. But to me, which makes zero sense, because for a broker who makes a living by earning commission, I would think that's something that they themselves would want to establish very early on. And, rather than going through the deal, coming to an agreement, and then having the broker be like, oh, by the way, there's only X amount.
This is a dicey subject because commissions do tend to vary as the deal goes on. How do you make the deal? It's just the nature of the beast. And there's nobody that woke up in the morning and said, man, do I want to pay a commission? So we are in a position where we have to earn it, and then the really usually wealthy, very smart people try to figure out how to grind that down, and it's just complicated. But it is part, you got to know it when you get in the business that yes, you try to start with 10, but when they start talking net and your customer's talking gross, everybody might have to put their hand in the pocket, and you all hate it. But it does seem to be a necessary evil of the business. Am I wrong?
Yes and no.
In my
I think there's a
experience-
fine line with that, and I think too for the industry as a whole and for growth of the industry and bringing more people into it and maintaining a very high level of professionalism, that's a very easy thing to do, is reduce commission, especially when you're competing against one broker to the next, one guy's like, I'll take 7%, the other guy's like, it's just a race to the bottom. And I think that it's like my team knows that I do not believe in commission reductions because I know the value that I myself and my guys that we provide to our clients.
Marketing.
But I think that's something that is, with more experience, you're able to overcome that and not to let it become a race to the bottom. Whereas if the industry were united in that sense in maintaining full commissions going through a deal, and there's certainly exceptions here and there, but too much is happening right now where it's just a complete race to the bottom.
I don't know that I disagree.
I think a signed commission agreement helps prevent a lot of that.
Well, you're
in my
also
experience.
devaluing your company.
Completely.
You're devaluing your services.
For sure.
And yeah, I agree. It should be disclosed, but it also starts. Look, we have let's think about it. We have 3 MLS systems, right? Although we're trying to shift everything over to IYBA, to legitimize everything versus some of the others. But there should be in every single platform a area where you check off special commission, or you have to have the commission structure in the listing back end, so everybody knows when
What you're working
pulling
with.
it up in the system, what it is.
If you look on yachtbroker.org, it's already there. I made a huge mistake. I should have selected this time slot for an hour and a half. We have time for one more question, Nancy, and then we do have to break because we have a schedule we got to keep.
Got it.
Thank you, guys.
Sorry to hold everybody up. And Jason, I'm sorry I'm going back to this matter of disclosure, but on some insurance company applications, they have a question that says, has this vessel ever had a prior, I don't know, accident loss? I think my peers in the room can probably speak a bit more to that, but it basically puts the owner on the hook for disclosing whether before their purchase the vessel has been in an accident or had a claim. And unless it's on the survey, which maybe once in a blue moon I've seen, that a survey says this has sustained some damage and here's how it was fixed, I think it just gets checked no, kind of, well, nobody told me, no. And I don't know if there's case law to support what would happen, but it's basically the owner's in the middle without knowing.
Wow.
Well, I have somebody, I'm glad to hear somebody's writing insurance.
Yeah.
I mean, the short answer to that, Nancy, the short answer there is that the customer who's buying the insurance policy has an utmost duty of loyalty and fidelity to the insurance company. And if they know that the boat had been sunk and don't report it, they don't have insurance. They've been paying premiums, but the minute there's an issue, if the insurance company could prove that the owner lied about that, there is no policy there. You have
Never lie on your
You have the
policy.
same kind of, the boat owner has the same kind of responsibility to the insurer as the broker has to their client. It's very similar.
No,
If they didn't know, they can say not to my knowledge or something like that. But if they know and they say that there was no damage history, or if they lie, then the insurer will have the right to avoid all of its obligations, which means you've been paying premiums.
in
for
today's
no
world, a repaired boat can be better than the original when it came out of the
reason. It
factory.
could be, but you can't lie to your insurance company. And if you do,
But you wouldn't know it, is my point.
Right, then
There's a
you
legitimate
lie.
reason not to know.
I mean,
You want to
Guys,
wrap
I
up?
am terribly sorry I got to cut this short, but the good news is we can pick up the conversation at our next event, so be here. It's interesting. Thanks
you.
very much
Thank
for
you
your
very much.
participation today, guys.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate you guys coming up and doing this.
Jason, Peter, Whit, Jeff, great stuff, everybody.